As mentioned in the headlines, Democratic Republic of Congo President Felix Tshisekedi appears set to retain his position as the country's provisional election results show that he's so far in the lead. Elections were marred by allegations of irregularities, raising concerns about the credibility. About 44 million Congolese cast their ballots in the presidential contest, as well as legislative and provincial elections. Let's talk now to political analyst Musa Mdunge about this. Musa, very good evening to you. Good to have your time. We're talking about this lead that Tshisekedi has taken, but important to note that much of what has been tallied so far comes from DRC nationals who voted abroad. So how clear a picture would that give us of where these results are likely to go ultimately?
Thank you so much, Tembegile, for having me, and good evening to your viewers. So these elections have, of course, been very interesting, given that they've been marred by so many delays, so many challenges, and also given that this is happening at a time where the country finds itself in great conflict and warfare, both internally and within the Great Lakes region. And so as we look at these results that are coming from those who are living abroad, these results are really minuscule in giving us a full picture of where the Congolese people sit in terms of where they want to see the country going. We will have to wait for these results to fully be tallied. We know that we expect provisional results at the latest around 31st of December. Of course, opposition parties have already, and opposition candidates have already made known their protest against how these elections were run. We know, of course, that even the European Union's own electoral observers pulled out of the elections. So, while these votes are promising for the incumbent, they do not tell the full picture, and time will tell where his fate will lie.
It'll ultimately be very interesting, isn't it, if Felix Tshisekedi is confirmed as the winner of this election. He would win a second term. It would be interesting to see that happen, because many Congolese have complained bitterly about the state of the economy, about the worsening security situation with a rebel group that's now displaced tens of thousands of people, in fact more than that, in the last while. And he's been in charge of the country from about 2018, 2019, seemingly unable to get a handle on the situation.
Indeed, the challenge for the incumbent is that for him to have assumed the seat of power, it came at the cost of having the support and the endorsement and the push of the former President Joseph Kabila, who himself is a controversial man, and we know the role that he has played and the role his family has played in the story of the DRC. And so this is a man who came into power with great expectation, but also great disappointment, given his links with the establishment politicians of the time. And though he has made some strides to do away with many of Kabila supporters within government and within the state, unfortunately, he has been unable to solve the real critical issues for the Congolese people, issues around security and issues around economic development in a country that hosts so many, resources, as well as is quite, wealthy and well endowed in terms of natural resources. It is quite sad to witness a country that has faced the challenges it has had. And though he has made certain strides, particularly when we look on areas of increasing, access to primary education as well as healthcare for women, unfortunately, these strides have not moved far enough in moving the needle for the Congolese people. This is a country that still faces great challenges in terms of poverty. Already, if we look at the fact that most of the population live below the poverty line of $2.15 per day or less. Moreover, the country just this year has faced a 15 to 20% decrease in terms of the Congolese franc. And that pressure on the currency, though you would think would be good for exporting mineral resources, given the challenges the country faces, has been a burden in terms of cost of living. So this is a president, like many others, is having to answer these questions around cost of living and the kind of future that needs to be built in that country.
How worrying, though, is the level of uncertainty or doubt over the credibility of the electoral process, which we know on the first day was so symbolic that voting had to be extended for 2 days. One of the comments being quoted from people who were in the country during voting. It says here was from the US-based Carter Center. In fact, it raised what it says were concerns about serious irregularities because at 21 of the 109 polling stations it visited, it noted a lack of confidence in the process.
Indeed, this is the challenge for, African countries in terms of how do you ensure that you host elections that are credible, that can stand the test, of both the media and other players, as well as just your citizens. Having the confidence in the electoral process is such a critical thing to have if you are going to maintain a fledgling and a healthy democracy. And unfortunately, we don't see that happening in the DRC. And so these concerns, as raised by this particular group with links to the United States, is very interesting, because when we then begin about the kind of international interests that are vested in this particular country, it becomes interesting when you think of the fact that this is a country that hosts 70% of the world's cobalt, minerals, which are critical for the production of phones. And when you think of countries like China, countries like America, countries like South Korea, that are dominant players in the technology space, countries like DRC become critical feeder countries in terms of the resources they provide. Mm-hmm. And so it is quite worrying when we hear news that these elections didn't have the kind of confidence that they needed to have. We know the challenges faced in terms of funding. We know that funding was only produced, in the last minutes before these particular elections. And it is an indictment not only on the DRC, but on the broader continent, both SADC, the EAC, as well as, in fact, AU, where they've been called to say that the AU needs to strengthen election monitoring and supporting mechanism and provide funding to ensure that Africa can hold credible elections and not have to depend on external powers, right, which have its own implications.
Let's end then with what happens once we've got the full set of the provisional results, which are expected to at least be in by 31st December, the end of this year. When Felix Tshisekedi was pronounced as winner back in 2018, there was a period of protests in the country over allegations of fraud, etc. About 34 people were killed during those demonstrations. Is there a likelihood of a repeat of those scenes?
It is definitely a likelihood, Tembegile, that we will see a repeat of such scenes, given, if you think of the fact that you have in the eastern DRC, where the bulk of its mineral resources are based, there's a huge conflict going on with rebel groups such as the M23, which have been said by some to be supported by Rwanda as well as Kenya. Let's consider the fact that M23 made the decision to cease from any conflict during this period of elections in Kenya, which brought about quite a lot of diplomatic, spat and conflict between the two countries. So we can expect conflict in the region, in the Great Lakes region, and it will be interesting to see what will be the response of both SADC and the EAC, given that the DRC is both a member of these two regional bodies. How effectively will these bodies work together, given also the vested interest that some of these countries have? So this will be a difficult time, and it is likely that we are going to see this have to go to the courts and see some sort of a resolution or some sort of compromise being facilitated by African states and other external powers. But the time will tell. But right now, it looks like we will see the same of what we've always seen happening in the DRC, and as well as many other African countries that face elections that are very controversial and quite consequential, such as these.
Musa Mdunge, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight on News of Prime.